So, I never seen this guy on a podcast before. This guy over here, I don't know his name. I guess NRX Studios. Never seen his podcast in my life, but it popped up as I guess Nick Fuentes did an interview with him. So we're gonna watch it, see what happens. So Christian nationalism meets America first. So seems pretty interesting. So let's get into it.
Maybe I'm more liberal than you. I don't know what the penalties would be specifically, but I think certainly the government needs to enforce some level of morality.
Yes.
Within reason. And I think what you're talking about when you say the perpetual indulgence, these are deliberately subversive,
Yes.
morally subversive. There's no positive good where that could be defended.
This is just one episode of a 10-part series with perhaps the most controversial man in America, namely Nicholas J. Fuentes. Now, the whole series will eventually be made public right here, with one new episode dropping each week on Wednesday. And we're not just talking about Nick's childhood experiences.
Interesting. Well, I guess we'll definitely be watching what he has to say. So actually, let me subscribe so I can, react to this later.
What he did in college back in the day. No, we're focusing our exclusive attention on what Nick believes. What is it that Nick really thinks about race, women, Trump, Israel, Jews, masculinity, and even more? That's what this series is all about. It's a one-stop shop to focus on the core tenets of Nick Fuentes' beliefs on the major headline issues of our day. Now, you're going to have to wait a total of 10 weeks for this to slow drip out to the public. However, for those of you who may be interested, you can binge watch all 10 episodes ad-free today by heading over to patreon.com and searching NXR Studios. And now, back to our show. This is the first of a 10-part series with Nicholas J. Fuentes. Each episode will drop once per week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time. Now, some of you may be wondering, why? Why would you sit down and interview him for over 10 hours? Well, one of the answers is because, to our knowledge, so far, no one else has. We didn't want to just do a one sitting where, hey, tell me about your college experience. Tell me about the time that Ben Shapiro blew up your Twitter account. No, we wanted to have a thorough, one-stop shop, deep dive on the core tenets of the man's actual beliefs. What does he really believe about faith, about politics, about Israel, about America, foreign affairs, men, women, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, the whole nine yards? Now, why? Why does it matter what he believes? Well, because he's not merely the most controversial man in America. For pretty much everyone under the age of 45, he's arguably also the most significant man in America. And whether you love him or hate him, your neighbors are listening to what he has to say.
True.
And so why not actually get to the bottom of it? Why not ask the questions that need to be asked? What do you think about every single major headline issue that matters in our day? Now, there's another reason that we chose to do this series with Nick. See, if you had a time machine and you could go back to 2012, 2013, 14, knowing what you know today about Donald Trump, and you could sit down with him back then and interview him for over 10 hours, would you do it? Even people who hate Trump, if they were honest, would say yes. Why? Because you see the man's significance. You can call me stupid, and maybe I am. Maybe as time goes on, there'll be egg on my face. But I think that the energy surrounding his convictions and beliefs about everything right now in America that seems to matter most. Tune in now.
Radical Christian nationalist pastor, Joel Webber. Joel Webber? Let's talk about Joel Webber.
Joel Webber. Excellent.
Nicholas J. Is it J?
Yes.
Fuentes. In the flesh. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you too.
Yeah. So this is actually going to be a 10-part series. It's not just a one and done. You were gracious with your time, came out, spent about half a week with us last fall by the time that this is airing. And we want to do a lot of good with this series. And so it's going to be 10 parts, and we are reserving nothing. I gave you my word that nothing's going to be behind the paywall or, keep it in the vault. You'll never get to see it unless you give us your money. We are going to have kind of some of the raw footage available for ad-free and early access. So if anybody is like, they're watching this, it's the first episode, and they're like, 10? It's 10 parts? I want to get it all, right now. So if you want to binge watch it, you can, and we're going to make that available. You hear about that a little bit later, how to get that. But if you're like, nah, I don't want to have to pay for it, it will all come out, but we're going to do one at a time. So one episode per week for 10 weeks. So this is probably going to go all the way through halfway into March. So I'm excited. So first thing that I thought that we should talk about is America First and Christian nationalism. You're a Christian nationalist, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to ask you about America First, but first, let's start with the Christian nationalist piece. Obviously, they both run into each other. When you say you're a Christian nationalist, what do you mean by that?
I believe that America's a Christian nation,
Yeah.
Which is sort of in the name. Christian nationalist, America's a Christian nation. And I think that Christianity is an essential part of America's identity. Fundamentally, I think that America should have a Christian government, is what I think that ultimately comes down to.
Amen.
And if you want to get very specific and detailed about it, I believe that only Christians should be legislators, judges, and in the executive branch.
Amen.
I think that if Christianity is right and true, if God has a law, then our government should follow that. I think that's historically our identity. I think that's the truth. I think that's consistent with what our civilization is. So I would start there. I think that we should have a fully Christian government.
What do you...
I mean, I do agree that, honestly, we shouldn't be giving, other, religions power, I guess, like law power, there should be no Sharia courts in countries or in within our states, Sharia courts. No, bro, there shouldn't be so there's the federal law, then the state law, and then somehow this Sharia law is over everything else, and there's nothing the state can do about it or the feds can do about it because of some religious type bullshit. What? That's retarded. America is a Christian country, no doubt about it. They're founded Protestants. The country's founded on Protestants. So America's a Christian country, whether or not it's more we are more secular now. Nobody really goes to church anymore. There's not really a godly. It's not really a godly society really anymore, unless you really go to certain parts of the South, really, or you go to Utah for the Latter-day Saints, and then it's more godly. But in general, America is less godly, but make no doubt about it, it is a Christian country. No matter what anybody says who's a different religion, America is a Christian country.
I agree wholeheartedly. Lex Rex, the law is above the king. I'm actually comfortable with the king. I think just because of America's founding and history, I think we could functionally get there, but I don't think we would ever call someone a king. It's just not in our blood as Americans. There's an aversion to that. But even if there was a monarch, the law of God is still ultimately the ruler. Lex Rex, the law above the king. In terms of the law of God, we have all these statutes throughout the Old Testament, and then many of them restated and some new ones in the New Testament. But the summary of the law would be the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, Exodus chapter 20. That really summarizes the law. And then Jesus summarizes it even further when he says, the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, strength. And the second is like it, that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. All of the law, he continues, and the prophets they rest on these two commandments. So the way I see it is, Jesus is love God, love neighbor. That being a summary of a summary, being the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, there's 10 of them, but really they fall into two tables. You have the first four of the Ten Commandments. Now I know Catholics and Protestants, we count them a little differently, but in the Protestant case, it's the first four of the Ten Commandments are in regards to how to love God. Have no other gods before me. Don't make graven images. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The next 6 is love for neighbor. And it's honor your father and mother. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness, and don't covet. And so Jesus says, love God, love neighbor. The Ten Commandments. This is how to love God with a little bit more specificity, and how to love neighbor. And then everything else all these Old Testament civil statutes, they ultimately fall underneath one of the Ten Commandments, whether it's a parapet around the border of your roof, right? You have to have like this railing. Well, they don't have HVAC during the summer months. They're sleeping on the roof, and you're loving your neighbor by making sure he doesn't fall off in the middle of the night and break his leg. So even that you can root to the commandment, the sixth commandment, thou shalt not murder. Stated in the positive sense would be thou shalt protect and esteem the safety and dignity of human life. So we can look at that even in our Western context and say, well, that's silly. That's primitive. You Bible thumpers. Well, we have laws about speed limits and seatbelts and we're not up on the roof anymore. But find me a 2-story balcony in anybody's home that doesn't have a railing, right? And if it didn't, eventually there'd probably be a legal issue. So it's not that different. We're like that still to this day. So if we're going to have laws, I'd like to see them modeled off of the scripture. So my question, I guess, to you, though, is this is where I see a lot of Christians start to say, well, not that. The first table of the law. A lot of guys will say, yeah, we need laws as it pertains to loving neighbor, protecting his safety, these kinds of things. But I don't want blasphemy laws. Like, what about, the first of the 10 Commandments, we can't have that, all 10 Commandments on a courthouse. It's like, well, I have bad news for you. We can't do that because freedom of religion, which I look at freedom of religion and I, at some level, as a Christian, I'm like, so freedom for idolatry? Like, I mean, what is that other than like, hey, in America, we protect the freedom for people to worship sand demons and erect 90-foot tall statues to some false god.
I do think it's fine. Like, if America has different religions, like people want to celebrate their religion, that's fine. But like, it shouldn't influence how the country's run in any type of way, whether it's law, economics, social, or cultural. It shouldn't influence that, because if you want that, then go back to your country where you came from. Like, if you want that type of culture, society, the economics, how it's run, go to your country. Don't bring that here. America's been like this for, 500 years? Like, let it be, bro. Like, what do you, like, no, bro, like, no.
I think that we've always had blasphemy laws. It's not whether but which. And I'm not saying some kid who says JC should go to jail, but like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, gyrating in front of a man dressed up like Christ on a cross in a public parade. Believe it or not, jail. Right away, jail. Right. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think I would agree with that. And I think that it's interesting how people in this country have such an aversion to anything that looks or sounds like that. But you look at very modern countries in the Middle East, for example, like the United Arab Emirates. People go to Dubai, and this is a hotspot for the world's rich, for entertainers. And a lot of people go there who are pretty secular and pretty liberal. But everybody knows that when you go to Dubai or Riyadh, for that matter, or any of these Gulf countries, which are very wealthy, very modern, technologically sophisticated, and cosmopolitan even, everybody knows the rules. And the rules are you don't disrespect Islam. And the whole country abides by that. And there's laws governing public displays of affection, modesty, all kinds of things. And nobody seems to have a problem because they know they don't mess around there. They take their religion seriously. And when you land at that airport, everybody knows you got to play by those rules. And people seem to be okay with that. But for some reason in America, even the insinuation that you might have something like that for Christ, for the church, people say it's the handmaiden's tale. It's Gilead. This is regressive. What is this? The Middle Ages?
Yeah, it's kind of, people that make those comments usually are liberal, and also secular. So, they don't want God imposed on them, which I do necessarily agree. Like, you shouldn't have like God like forced on you. Like, you have to come to God on your own terms. Yeah. Like, obviously as a kid, parents should take you to church so, you can get some type of influence and stuff. But like, once you're older, like, you shouldn't be like forcing God upon people. Let them come to God. If they don't want to, then that's up to them, So, but I do like what the UAE does, where like, just the laws that they have, it's very good, because like 20% of the country is Emirati, and then the 80% is people, other different type of, all over the world, people live there, and it's kind of crazy. And they're a big tourist destination, which is even more people, which is kind of crazy of how like they keep so much order there. And it's really because of their laws, because they know, like, if you're doing things stupid, oh man, that fucking that desert cell gonna be hot as fuck, and like that food gonna be dog shit. Like, nobody want to fuck with that shit,
And Maybe I'm more liberal than you. I don't know what the penalties would be specifically, but I think certainly the government needs to enforce some level of morality.
Yes.
Within reason. And I think what you're talking about when you say the perpetual indulgence, these are deliberately subversive,
Yes.
morally subversive. There's no positive good where that could be defended.
Right.
I don't know that I would outlaw, let's say, heresy, because there should be room for religious debate. It's like there always has been in the church or at different councils and things like that. But something that is deliberately and intentionally meant to blaspheme and offend God and the morals of any decent person, I don't think there's any basis for that. And so, of course, in America at the same time, we have a tradition of freedom of speech, but maybe we need to articulate what the basis of free speech is. Why is free speech good? If free speech is good insofar as we could debate about what form of government is best or what kind of society we should have, I'm willing to be more liberal when it comes to things like that. But filth, which is like pornography, for example,
Right.
what actually, that's not political speech.
No.
And I don't think there's anything positively good. I don't even actually consider it speech.
It's not religious speech either.
No.
Although I have seen some Jews say that both abortion and pornography are Jewish religious sacraments.
Which
to
is
them.
interesting.
Very interesting.
So I tend to agree. I don't, like I said, I'm probably not as conservative when it comes to religious law as maybe you are, or some Protestants, or even for that matter, some traditional Catholics who say there should be no freedom of religion, which is, I think, what you're saying. But I certainly think that there should be some basic standards like they have in Russia or any other country.
So from my position, I think that it's just, there are degrees. So like Tom Cruise, Minority Report, like I don't want, where we're predicting crimes and even policing. When I think of Old Testament Israel, the actual Jews, I think of, there's not really a police system, right? So there's punitive justice, but they're not going around, with back to the parapet, the border on the roof. There's no, at least no recording in the Old Testament of the parapet committee, that would go house to house, annually to measure and make sure that they hit the metrics. It's like, you need to have a parapet, and if you don't, then you get arrested. No. If you don't, then you're liable if something happens. Right? So if you don't have a border on your roof and nobody ever gets hurt, no harm, no foul. If somebody does get hurt and you had a border, then it's on them. If they do get hurt and you didn't have a border, now you're liable. The same with like a bull, that's accustomed to gore. Well, you could have a violent bull, but if nobody gets gored, you're okay. But if they do, and you've already, like you've known, and that can be proven in a court that you knew that this was a dangerous animal, and it hurt someone, then it's not just that the bull is stoned, according to the Old Testament, and so is the owner. Personally, the general equity of that principle, I'll get some flack for this, but I'd apply it to pit bulls. You can have a pit bull, but that dog is genetically bred in such a way that it is extremely dangerous, especially to children. And so you can own a pit bull. In America, I say that you can own a tiger if you want. But if you own a golden retriever and it has a really bad day and does something, tragic, the golden retriever is put to death, and you're probably going to have to go to court and those kinds of things, but I don't think you get locked in jail. But you have a pit bull that has that reputation, and the pit bull kills, 2 little 5-year-old girls. The pit bull gets put down, and so do you. That would be my position. So I say all that to say, one, there are degrees, but two, also just the system.
Interesting. They also, I guess they're also starting to be some more, case law, I guess you'll call it, where people are trying to hold school shooters, people that do school shootings to children, or I guess even if they're adults, well, nah, not adults, just kids below the age of 18, when they do school shootings, they're trying to hold the parents accountable for not securing the weapon properly, not taking out the firing pins, like actually like ensuring that their kid is good and like mentally stable, which I guess it's kind of complicated because it's like, damn, bro, like, do I want to have guns in my house? And now that I know that, like, I could potentially be held liable for my kid, like, shooting, like, somebody, which I guess isn't a bad thing. I guess when I think about it, it's kind of like, I take out all the firing pins and I lock away all the bullets, so I guess it's fine. But then, like, what if somebody breaks into my house? Now I can't, like, defend my family, Obviously, I can keep a gun, like, I guess locked away in my desk. I guess, I guess it's fine, Yeah, I guess it's whatever. Yeah. I don't know, I'm kind of iffy because I really don't want to be held accountable for if my kid does something. that terrible, which honestly I don't think they will, because I'm not gonna personally, I'm gonna raise my kids on conservative values. They're not gonna be like liberal minded fucking hippies, you know. So hopefully they don't turn out like that, and I'm really gonna try to ensure they don't turn out like that, you know. But I'm kind of like 50-50 on it. I do agree that the parents should be held accountable, you know. But I'm like, I don't know if I personally want to be held accountable for that, you know. So yeah.
In itself, it's less of a policing. So there's actually a lot of freedom. Like people are like, well, I don't want the government, to tell me what to do in my bedroom. Well, the government currently tells you how to build your bedroom, right? The studs have to be this many inches between. Like we police everything, and it's also costly. Like when you think of just how much management is required, how many taxes we're spending for people to tell us every single thing to do. But a system that's punitive and retributive. Rather than constantly trying to predict and stop crimes before they even occur. And then in terms of the degrees, the last thing I would say is we're not talking about the Muslim police that go into private homes and are rounding people up. So a lot of this for me, when it comes to the first table of law and things like idolatry and false religions, the major factor there would be there's a difference between sins and crimes. And I think you have to have that category, that distinction. There's plenty of sin. I have sin. But the state has no business in punishing sin. That belongs to the church, whether it's confession or whether it's excommunication or barred from the sacraments or whatever it may be. For a time, sin is dealt with by ultimately God and through the avenue of the church. Crimes are dealt with by the state. And there are some sins that, biblically speaking, are not crimes. It is a sin, but it's not a crime. So I would say Muslims worshiping in their homes is not a crime. Muslims erecting that 90-foot tall statue outside of Houston, I think that's a crime, and I think people involved with that should have some kind of penalty, whether it's a fine, this, that, or the other, and the statue should be ground to dust. We don't do that here. This is America. We're a Christian nation. Say Christ is Lord. That would be my view. Would you? So now, giving it a little bit more specificity, what do you think about that?
I like that. I like that approach, because I think when people hear moral law, they hear moral police.
That's what they hear.
Right.
Yeah.
And what
Liberal
they think about is
wokeism.
that you're going to have inquisitors kicking down the door if somebody's watching an R-rated movie
Right.
or something like that, which I think anybody would be opposed to, and rightly so. I believe in liberty.
Right.
And I think that part of that comes with, I also like the distinction of crime and sin. People do have the liberty to sin, and that's why we have the sacraments, because we're going to sin. And we don't want to sin, and we try not to, but it's not a crime to do that, and we're supposed to be given a chance to repent and to spiritually grow. So I do like that distinction. And I don't know that I would necessarily agree with the death penalty in many or even most cases. I tend to be anti-death penalty in almost all, except for terrorists or...
What about murder?
It depends on the type of murder.
I didn't know this about you.
Yeah, I think even murderers
Really?
should be spared, yeah.
Really? Why?
Because I think they should be given
So
a chance.
you really like the current pope then, huh?
Well,
You just said that.
Yeah, I tend to think that the death penalty is no longer totally necessary. I think in the old days, you literally needed to kill these people because you really couldn't accommodate them in prison forever. But now I think that society can accommodate that, and I think that only the most heinous crimes should be punished by death. I think everybody else, it should be given the...
That's true. I do agree with that. Like, literally, only the most heinous crime should be, like, honestly, like, if you're raping somebody, like, then there's actual proof, because, like, I know, like, there's, fake stuff, like, I don't know, like, if there's actually, like, 100% proof of a rape, I think, honestly, because that stuff happens all the time. We see it in college, like, kids get kicked out or convicted of, like, some type of shit, or alleged that they raped somebody, even though, like, you guys are both drunk or some shit like that, Maybe that I would agree with, maybe give them, like, for, like, rape, unless it's, like, a child is, like, 100% proof. I'll say give them, like, 5 years for, like, I don't know, some type of facts to come out, maybe, like, or what's it called, a retrial or something like that, Maybe more evidence can come out, and then they can get out, and then they don't get, killed, I guess, how you would say it. But, yeah, I would say that, honestly. Serial killers, yeah, I think they should get killed. Who else? Yeah, honestly, terrorists should get killed, terrorizing people, I guess that's about it. Mass shooters, but that's kind of terrorism, like, that goes into terrorism, I think these people should get killed, honestly, because I don't think they should go to jail, because then we're using our tax dollars to pay for them to still be alive, even though they didn't give a fuck about the people they killed being alive, so why should we care about them being alive, So.
One, I do really worry about the killing of innocent people that are falsely convicted.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
a huge part of it. But also, I think that
I agree.
people should be given a chance to repent. And I don't think those are necessarily our lives to take, even for the government. So I tend to be more, and maybe that's because I'm a political dissident, so I'm a little biased.
Yeah.
I tend to get anxious when I think about the government having license to freely kill people, you know?
That's going to be me.
They do it anyway,
Yeah,
I suppose,
right, yeah.
extrajudicially all the time. But no, I tend to be more against the death penalty than for it.
At the foot of Mount Sinai, a nation met its God in thunder.
Should I skip this?
I have to go on record saying, in the case of murder, I think that the death penalty is not only permissible, but biblically speaking, I think that it's mandated. And I root that not just in the Decalogue, but the Noahic covenant. And if any man takes another man's life, he forfeits his own. So, but as it pertains to what we were talking about just right before that, so sins versus crimes, not policing, that made you feel like, okay, I can see that. In terms of now, like degrees of punishment, and the death penalty being the highest capital punishment, the way that I read the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, it's not just murder, right? In Genesis 9, Noahic covenant, that's there. But then you start getting into Leviticus and, Numbers, and it's like, if you carry, a bundle of sticks on the Sabbath, death, an unruly son who's disrespectful or strikes his father, in rebellion, death. I'll admit, as a Christian pastor, I've read the Bible once or twice, and the death penalty is pretty. God's pretty generous with the death penalty in the Old Testament. Pretty liberal with that. And one thing that really helped me, I remember reading one theologian, and his name is Rushduni. And he talked about so think of it like this: the state of Texas. Like you'll see, don't mess with Texas, which sadly I can tell you, you can absolutely mess with Texas. Texas is pretty limp-wristed, sadly. But don't mess with Texas. Don't litter. And you'll see the signs. It's like littering can be penalized up to, and so it's like the implication is there's a scale, and so it's like up to $5,000 fine or 2 years in prison. But I personally, I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who's currently doing hard time for throwing away a candy wrapper out of the car window. But I think the reason is there is because even though it seems silly, like nobody would do that. I mean, there are some actually retarded people in the world who might. I think of the repeat offender, so it's like, it's one thing if it's like, you throw a candy wrapper out. But what if you've been pulled over, 47 times this year for littering? And then you got bigger and bigger to where you're like, you're burning all of your trash and rubber tires in the backyard to own the libs, meanwhile you're literally destroying the earth. And then, and it's just more and more. Well, eventually it's like, yeah, I think you actually should go to prison. Even then I wouldn't say the death penalty. But when I look at all these Old Testament laws outside of murder, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, I think that's proportional justice. But in those cases where it's not murder, you're not taking a life, I think, the death penalty is often cited, but I think it's cited kind of like the litter sign in Texas. I think it's cited as a maximum penalty and would be reserved. Like, as I've studied, if a son strikes his father in rebellion, he's put to death. I've read like a bunch of historians and different guys. There's actually not one case in all of Old Testament Israel's history of that ever being carried out. So it's like, here's this law, and I don't think it's just that it wasn't enforced. I think they knew, right? We have what's inscripturated. We don't have all the side conversations and things like that. I think they knew, like, this is not just like a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum, right? This is, and even next to it says, or if he is a drunkard. It's not talking about a little kid. It's talking about a grown man with his elderly parents publicly shaming mom and dad, which is debauchery and rebellion. And likely, I think we're meant to assume, repeat offender. He's been brought, before the elders in Israel and told he needs to get in line. And there's zero restraint. And it's not just a personal insult, like slap one cheek, turn the other. But he's violent. He's dangerous. He's a liability. He's criminal. And I think, that to the nth degree, can go all the way up, although they never had to enforce it, but could theoretically go all the way up to death. That helps me, like when I think of homosexuals, for instance. It's like, Joel, so do you think all homosexuals should be stoned? And it's like, well, bullets are little stones. I don't think we have to pick up. But no, I'm being facetious. No, I don't. But I think that I think it's a sin, and I think that it can become a crime. So it's one thing if it's two guys. That's how the whole slippery slope happened. They're like, oh, we just want the same rights as you. But yeah, but then you gave them an inch, and now it's like, hey, kids in the public library, sit in my lap as I'm dressed up as a drag queen, and we're going to put porn in all of your books, and we're going to, so I think that, or in New York, a gay pride parade with grown men with their genitalia hanging out in front of children on the sideline, okay, now we're talking about a crime.
Right.
and even then, I'm not saying immediately it has to, but a crime, some kind of penalty. And then are they so brazen they turn around next year and do it again, and do it again? What do you do if it's like the 10th year anniversary? They've been doing it for a decade running. Every single time you find them or you did it, like eventually there has to be a harsher penalty. So that's, even that, I know a lot of our listeners would be like, that's hardcore, but like, I think it helps, honestly, because a lot of people will point to the Old Testament, God's punishment. They'll say he's severe, he's too harsh. I like fleshing this out, if nothing else, just to defend the character of God. Like, God actually isn't harsh. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was thinking. And there are conceivable, even in our modern society, there are conceivable situations. And our mind immediately goes again to the 5-year-old kid who said, Dad, I'm mad at you. That's not what the Old Testament was talking about. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful because I think there is, rightly so maybe, I think there is such an aversion to that in the public consciousness, the idea of an executioner swinging an axe because of, and you're Protestant because someone said a swear word. Like, that's the kind of thing that people think. And I can't help it, me being from a very liberal city like Chicago, and even growing up in a suburb that was pretty liberal and permissive. I think, and as an American, there's just sort of a natural aversion to that, and to kind of an extremely punitive justice system. And I have to tell you, as a Christian, I don't come away from the gospel thinking that the state should be liberal with murder, should be liberal, let's say, with the death penalty. I, with that being said, believe that people should be put in prison. There should be a lot more people in prison. And I've said before on my show, I think the prisons should be made more humane, because then we could put more people there for longer. The reason that we don't like prison a lot is because the prison is like, you can die.
Well, yeah, that too. And like, unless they like really commit some heinous stuff, like I said previously, honestly, like, I don't like, I mean, yeah, it should be on their record, but like, the felony stuff is like terrible because like they can't do anything with it. Like, how do you expect somebody to get a job? Like, unless they do something heinous, like I already said. Okay, they sold some dope. Okay, they sold some drugs. They carried a gun. They're not supposed to. They high-speed chase. I don't know, beat up a cop. Like, okay, like, shit, man. Domestic violence, that's terrible, but okay, yeah. Okay, they shot somebody, as long as they're not shooting kids or, like, women, it's like, okay. Like, bro, like, at some point, like, there has to be restructuring of the law because these people can't get jobs. What they're gonna do? What are they gonna do? Revert back to crime? Because how are they gonna start over? They can't. Like, they're not gonna make enough money really to start over. Like, they have to like go really hard and like be really like somebody has to give them a chance. And like the people that probably give them a chance are like low paying minimum wage jobs, and how are they gonna survive off that? Like, it's terrible, So that's what I think. They need to change some of the laws to where, like, yeah, they did this, but like we have to give them opportunities so they can live a new life.
Prison. You get raped in prison. It's inhumane in some ways, but I think that we should make them maybe more modern and nicer so we feel comfortable sending people there so that they can be rehabilitated. I do believe that we should have a society that's forgiving, but I also agree that what you're describing, I don't think anybody has a problem with in principle, which is that people that cannot get along in society should be removed from society, whether that's put in a box forever or whether they get the death penalty.
Or banishment.
Ostracism, banishment, exile, anything like that. And it is helpful to think of the worst case scenario. Because I think you strike me as a warm-hearted person. I'm a warm-hearted person. I don't think that society should be looking to inflict punishment on people. However, evil exists. And it is instructive to think of the worst case examples. Like, as a Catholic, I think of Satanists who will go and steal one of the blessed hosts. They'll go and steal the bread during the Mass and use it in a black Mass or to desecrate it. And someone who is doing that, I think, should get the death penalty because that is the body of Christ. So, maybe coming at it from a different point of view.
Different point.
I can understand it
But
more.
I do appreciate that, although we have different views on the sacraments. I do appreciate that because that's not the Satanist physically hurting any person, neighbor. But that's actually a desecration of God, according to the Catholic view. So that would be a first table, like love the Lord.
Right.
And I appreciate that because even among Protestants, like I've gotten a lot of pushback. A lot of Protestants who are like devout in love the Lord and want to see America be a Christian nation. There's just something in their American DNA and I would argue modern American, because America wasn't actually always this way. America had, we had blue laws, Sabbath laws, we had blasphemy laws, right? So it's not even just once upon a time in Israel. No, it's like it's been done before, it's been done recently, and it's been done here.
Right.
It actually is American. Actually is. Hasn't been for a little while, but actually is. But yet, what I'm saying is that a lot of these Protestants who really love God, I'm not questioning that, and really want the country to be Christian, they still anything within the first table. So they would differ from you. They'd be like, yeah, murder is capital punishment. But the example that you gave, like something that's exclusively only blaspheming the church, blaspheming Christ, they would say, well, yeah, that's really bad, and that should be frowned upon. But the state has no business enforcing any kind of moral law of God within the first table of the law. Love the Lord your God. Don't make any graven images. Don't take his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath. And the fact that you actually have like a case study that would fall in that category is based. I like it.
Good.
So,
well, yeah, because that's something that can never be excused or pardoned with good intent. Nobody would accidentally, that is so intentional and so malicious. Nobody would accidentally conspire to take the Blessed Sacrament and desecrate it in an evil ritual by accident or with good intent that's just evil.
Yeah, I can see a couple Protestants doing it.
Yeah, I suppose.
Just because how dare you?
You're extremely anti-Catholic,
yeah,
sure.
Right, yeah.
So I could understand that in some cases. I just think it's also important to preserve, like, let's be honest, and I agree with you, 60 years ago, we had some very intense laws on the books about sodomy, about race mixing, about blasphemy. Pornography was effectively illegal for a long time. There was a case with Larry Flint, which is what made it more permissive. And I think that we've clearly just gone way too far in the opposite direction.
Yes.
I don't want to go back to the Middle Ages. I don't even necessarily want to go back to the 1800s. But I think that we have definitely just gone so far in the opposite direction where anyone can recognize, you go into the city square and it's nudity, weed, public intoxication, public displays of affection. And by that, I mean, in some cases, people are having sex openly in public. People are naked protesting in Portland. And
yeah, I do disagree with that shit. I do agree with that shit. Like, bro, like these naked parades and like free the nipples and like these pride parades. Like, bro, put clothes on. Like, there's kids here. Like, nobody cares, bro. Like obviously people care, but like, bro, like, why are you naked? Like, no, like that's like a sign of like really a failing society where like you think your pride and ego is more important than like the importance of like children and like the welfare of like the rest of society who don't necessarily like care about like what you feel or like your sexual orientation. Like, bro, like nobody cares, bro. Like,
this is not a decent society we want to live in. And I agree that once it crosses into scandalizing others, children, it's offending other people, trespassing on the commons, I think that does then become subject to the law.
Yeah.
And I like what you said even about that slippery slope. They talk about the privacy of their own homes. It's sort of paradoxical because they were never arguing for discretion. They were never arguing for let us be private. It was always, and whether it was homosexuals or anything for that matter, they wanted to bring it out into the public.
Correct.
And for it to be tolerated, openly acknowledged. And so it's sort of strange because that's the argument people always use is, well, what about privacy? I don't think anyone has a problem with discretion and privacy. They have a problem with what it is now, which is loud and proud, public, vulgar for the sake of it, transgressive and offensive, provocative for the sake of it. And why would a decent society tolerate that?
And predatory.
Yes.
With children.
Yeah, malevolent.
Yeah, I agree. Last thing that I would do, like, as you know, I would absolutely call myself a Christian nationalist, and I helped, with a group of guys in writing a statement on Christian nationalism a few years back. Last thing that I would do, there's a million things, but big macro picture. So legislation, laws, we've talked about that. I think one of the not so rare, sadly, founders L's is I think they should have more explicitly named the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I actually like the Constitution. I don't think that we can. I'm not hopeful that we can get back to it. That'd be great to just Constitution even harder, but it just hasn't been working out for us for quite a while. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to be able to just vote our way out of it. I think if history, is any bearing, I think something else is going to happen. But I do like the Constitution.
Yeah, for the society how it's going now, it's definitely going to change. Honestly, I think they're definitely going to be taking people's rights away because the the population is gonna collapse based off feminism, people's feelings, and like they have all these issues and like can't buy a house because there's not enough money to be made, and like cars are too expensive, having a family is too expensive, women don't want to be with average men, and yeah, like it's gonna eventually all collapse. And so like honestly, I think a dictatorship's definitely gonna be in like, or at least some type of authoritarianism is gonna be in America's future, because like it has to be, American society has to be saved, and it can't be solved by immigration.
Constitution, I think you would have to get back to authorial intent with the First Amendment and those kinds of things. Like Congress shall make no religion. So yeah, so Congress at a federal level, no, I don't think that the state can come and say we're going to have a national church and it's going to be this particular stream. It's going to be Episcopalian, and all the Presbyterians and all the Catholics and all the Baptists are going to be punished. I think that's un-American, and I think that was probably included in the realm of thought of the founders. But what was probably not their authorial intent, that they weren't thinking about at all, I don't think they could even conceive of like millions of Hindus. You know what I mean?
Right.
Millions of Muslims. When the First Amendment was written, I don't think they were saying, we want to make sure that in Minnesota, an entire town could be overrun by Muslims, and they could set up, statues and have prayer sirens and calls to pray. If they knew that was going to happen, I think like the First Amendment would look a little bit different. So when they say freedom of religion and those kinds of things, I think. I've read even some commentators on that, like early commentators. It was freedom in regards to various expressions of worship toward our common Lord. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That Catholics and Protestants wouldn't kill each other. That Baptists and Presbyterians wouldn't try to drown each other. I don't think it was so that millions of Muslims can live here and worship a sand demon.
Right.
I don't think that's what it was. So if we could get back to authorial intent,
sand demon?
and I mostly
That's
like the
funny.
Constitution. First 10 amendments are pretty good. Some of the latter ones I'd like to revisit, But last thing though is I do think like a preamble. I would love to see like the Nicene Creed adopted as a preamble to the Constitution, where we are. And I like creeds. I like confessions. I like the Westminster. I like the 1689. But I like creedal because it's more encompassing. A creed is precisely specific enough to where.
Yeah, dude. We should also bring back the Pledge of Allegiance. I think some states took it away because of religious reasons or whatever. I'm like, no, dude, like, you pledge allegiance to the country that you're in, and that gives you the rights that you so willfully enjoy or will enjoy once you become an adult, and the freedoms that you have. You should pledge allegiance to the country that you're born into, Like, that's normal, especially for America. Like, we're not like a dictatorship, like, it's not an authoritarian country, so like there's no like, there shouldn't be like a argument to where, well, you shouldn't be pledging allegiance to a country. Like, you should pledge allegiance, at least definitely to this country, because it's a good country. Like,
no non-Christian can affirm it, but also intentionally general enough to where the Christians don't turn on each other.
Right.
Like, you like the Nicene Creed.
I do.
I like the Nicene Creed. So that seems like a good, so like right before we get to the Constitution, let's start with that. Name the Lord Jesus Christ. Then let's add the first 10 amendments and the actual authorial intent. Let's maybe get rid of a few of the latter ones or amend them. And, and then let's actually legislate not a deep police state, but with gradations and using prudence and also compassion, and recognizing that the first table of the law, actually some of those things are not just sins, but crimes. And then other things are just sins, and the state has no business in it. And by God, we could have our home again. It'd be really nice. So that's, to me, Christian nationalism, America first. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes. I call myself America First because when we talk about who we are, what is our grouping, people tend to say we're conservative or right wing.
Right.
And I heard that my whole life. And I always identified as a conservative or libertarian or right wing or something. And these are terms that increasingly don't really have meaning. What actually does that mean? And people have to ask themselves, what is a conservative? Because now we're being told it's conservative to be a religious pluralist in favor of multiracialism, in favor. It's like, so what actually, people ask, are we even conserving or serious about conserving? And then people get to something like, well, being a conservative is being a liberal. It's being a right liberal, a classical liberal.
Right.
It's like, okay, so is conservatism even a tangible thing? And I look at myself in the context of what has happened in the past 30 years, which is globalization. and the globalization of the government with the supranational institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, these institutions that sit on top of our government, as well as the influence of foreign interests, multinational corporations, foreign intelligence agencies, the globalization of the population with open borders, immigrants pouring in, and this is even to your point about the intention of the Constitution. Was it intended for there to be millions of Indians, Chinese, and foreigners here? The answer is no. We're becoming globalized in terms of the demographics and the globalization of the economy through free trade, which is the interdependence of the United States with China, Mexico, Canada.
I do like what Trump's doing, trying to get more manufacturing back to America, because like if something goes bad when you go to war or that country fails, like, and we're depending on them for a certain amount of like important things like semiconductors or what, I don't know, let's just say food, avocado, cars, certain types of technology, the stuff that we actually need, I don't know, petroleum, gas, like we should be able to produce things in our own country. Like, we should not be relying upon other countries for our country to survive, and if that goes awry like it did during the pandemic. Like, shit got fucked up. The global supply chain got fucked up, and it's like, bro, we're relying on these people too much. Like, no, let's stop doing this. So, I do like what Trump's doing in that aspect of the economy.
These supply chains which make us dependent on other countries. And so it's in the context of globalization that I don't feel like a conservative, where they're preoccupied with limiting the size of government or vague appeals to family values, which become more vague and generic all the time. You could say that 20 years ago, to be conservative was to be Christian. Now in 2025, if you ask Turning Point USA, they say it's ethical monotheism. They have to say that to accommodate Jews, Muslims, Hindus.
That's terrible.
Right?
What are you conserving?
It's like arguably 100 years ago, maybe it was Presbyterian or Episcopalian, like a very American denomination. Then it became like, well, we're one nation under God, Christian God. Now it's like ethical monotheism. I wonder what it'll be like in 100 years when we have like polytheism and pagans. It'll just be like they'd be like deists or something.
Right, yeah.
And so anyway, I look at conservatives as basically they're just not speaking the same language anymore. It doesn't seem to have a hard definition. It doesn't seem to have answers for the actual problems affecting real Americans. I said, so my real ideology, which is something I was searching for in 2016 when Trump was elected, when Trump ran in 16, he didn't say I'm the most conservative. He didn't say I'm the most right wing or the most Republican. He said, I'm America first.
Right.
He said, this is about globalism and nationalism, not liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans. It's about globalists, internationalists, and nationalists, people that want to put the American people first. And in his inaugural, that's where I got the name of my show. And just funny story, when I started my show with Right Side Broadcasting Network, they asked me what I wanted to call the show. And my first instinct was the Nicholas J. Fuentes Show. And they said, well, that's too long. No one knows who you are. No one knows your name. I was like, okay. They said, so you need something shorter, something different. And I really had no idea. A month later, Trump gave his inaugural. And in the inaugural, he said, a new vision will govern our land. It's going to be only America first.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I said, that's it. Like that. And it's because that really encapsulates who we are. When I say we and like our kind of people and they, the people that are against us, it's those that that have a sense of American identity, that it's about the American people and their history, their heritage, going all the way back even before the founding, before the settlement of the North American continent, where we come from, who we really are, and putting that first, that's the priority, explicitly identifying as Americans. And even, what was the point of the border wall? Yes, it's to keep foreigners out. But I thought it was bigger than that. It was a tangible representation that said, this is America. That is the rest of the world. It gave us definition in a physical way. And I said, that's who I am. I'm America first. And that's something that Ben Shapiro could not claim.
Right.
The Democrats could not claim. You could even say the capitalist class. And by those, not to sound communist, but the wealthy, the owners, the people that own the multinational corporations. And they live everywhere. You know, they have houses in Europe and Asia and America. They do business everywhere. They could not even call themselves America first. So whether
it's typically you think it's conservative and liberals, and conservative over here, it's free trade, capitalism, you know, like, and so, or like a Ben Shapiro type, you'd be like, oh, he's one of us. And And those were kind of the dividing lines, and we're like, how come things just keep getting worse? And like,
Right.
well, it's like it's ping pong, but like both sides are really just two sides of the same coin. And you're right, Trump really, in a lot of ways, said like, the reason we keep losing is because both teams are against you. Both teams. Like that's not the paradigm, liberal conservative. The paradigm is the world or us. You know, and I think you saw that early and hopped on it, and that's kind of been your legacy for the last 10 years.
Yes. Well, that's how I position myself, because I look at someone like a Charles Koch, let's say, and say he's not America first. If you're in favor of like ultimate deregulation, ultimate neoliberalism, free trade, the rest of it, you're not really on my team. Even if you're in favor of capitalism broadly or traditional values or something like that. And the same goes for Shapiro or Soros. It was really just about properly setting people on the right sides of the issue. And so for 10 years, I've been creating this space where I didn't, and what's interesting, which I don't talk about too much anymore, but this is very relevant in 2017, is it seemed that there was no faction or no space for somebody that I would call a true alternative to the right wing. You had the term alt-right, which was extremely popular in 2016. And that label went through a lot of changes. In 2016, to be alt-right meant that you weren't an establishment Republican. Because in 2015, right up until Trump announced, well, you really had Bush Republicanism, Bush conservatism, and that's just what there was. Individual responsibility, small government, free markets, like that's what it was to be right, even the wars to be right-wing. Trump comes along and says, I'm a nationalist, not a globalist. And you just get this flood of new ideas. You get the French New Right. You get the perennialists like Evola. You get white nationalists, white identitarians, race realists, Holocaust revisionists, anti-Semites. You get all these other people that were right-wing, like they were anti-left, but they didn't fit that old mold of conservatism. And so people said, this is the alternative right. This is an alternative to what we're getting. And Trump wins the election. And after the election, alt-right became something very specific. And it really meant like anti-American, anti-Christian, because it was a lot of racialists, pure racialists that said it's not about America, it's about whites.
Right.
Or people that were against Christianity because they saw Christianity's left wing.
They
From
see
like
it
a
as
Nietzschean.
like a Jewish psyop to weaken the West through like a toxic compassion to eradicate white people.
Yes, and they see wokeness and leftism as proceeding from Christianity, Marxism proceeding from Christianity. And they identified with like the pagan new right in Europe, or they identified with even some like atheistic or secular versions of the right wing. And so I kind of came to realize in 2017, as Trump drifted back towards the establishment, there is really no space for something that I saw this vision so clearly, like a George Washington national identity, pro-America, identifying America with its European identity, identifying America with its Christian heritage, being very far right, anti-foreign wars, right wing on the economy, but not in favor of total international trade, total free trade, and things like that. And I said that this is where I think actually most people are. I think that people want to say Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
They want jobs. They don't want immigrants. They don't really care what the size of government is as long as it's efficacious and doing the things they want it to do well. They don't want to fight in wars. I said, like, this is where the country is. So that was my message basically from 2017.
And you blew up into the stratosphere. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. What do you, the whole time you were talking, you like Pat Buchanan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. But every Pat Buchanan has his Buckley to come and subvert and lie and slander, which that's, I mean, National Review, and I think, you know, and people still say it like it's a point of pride, you know, like it's a good thing to be Buckley. And I mean, he was even, you know, from my reading, he was even questioned, you know, later on in life, like, do you really think that Pat is an anti-Semite? And he was like, no. You know, like, no. Because I just publicly slandered him for, you know, forever, and totally just, you know, worked and subverted and took him out of the game just because he disagreed with me. You seem to be a Buchanan of sorts. Who are some of the Buckleys? Who are some of the guys who have really, over the last 10 years, thinking back, not just today, because it's easy to think of what's fresh, but who are some of the guys like early on who you feel like they saw what you were doing, maybe had an inkling of what it could become, and were like, we've got to stop it?
It was Shapiro. Without a doubt, he was the #1 op. And people don't realize, but in those days, Shapiro was worshipped. He was the guy. And that's before anyone was hip to it.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I remember, honestly, what led me to being more conservative is been listening to Ben Shapiro clips. Honestly, like, him and Jordan Peterson led me to, like, like, I guess you could say more the conservative kind of red pill mindset, and Fresh and Fit too. I discovered them way later, but it was really them two that led me to, like, listen to more conservative podcasters, and, like, reading more about conservatism and stuff, honestly. So it's pretty crazy. And I was like what, maybe like 7 years ago when I started doing that. It's crazy.
Of the Jewish stuff, Israel stuff, people weren't seeing it back then. And so they just looked at him as like a debate bro. Maybe they didn't even really know he was Jewish or even what that meant. They didn't really know the context with Israel. And so they looked at him as like a very far-right debate bro who was a no-holds-barred debater. Like when he went on Piers Morgan and debated about gun control, or when he went on college campuses and owned the liberals, they saw him as like as fashy, like a fashy-based, young debate guy. And Shapiro, of course, was a never-Trumper. And that is because he recognized what Trump was and like the potential of what Trumpism could become. Because when you say America first, it is basically the inverse of that is like not Israel first.
Right.
Because it's like, well, why would you need to declare America first? Who is coming before America? Well, some people might say the UN. Some boomers might say that. But the real people know who comes first when we talk about the war in Iraq. Who was put first there? And some of these other things. Now, Trump, he meant the whole international system. He meant like South Korea, Germany, because we had troops deployed there. He meant even these companies benefiting from offshoring the jobs or free trade agreements or things like that.
Come to find out, now with hindsight, Trump meant America first over everything, maybe except for Israel.
Yes, right, literally.
Yeah.
And so, Shapiro, it's sort of ironic. Like me and Shapiro, in like a weird horseshoe kind of way, we both saw what Trumpism really was.
Right.
No one else saw it. No one else,
Right.
And people were arguing back then, like, is Trump a Nazi? No, he's not. He hires black people. He's pro-Israel. But like me and Shapiro both heard the signal through the noise. We understood kind of the significance of what was implied, which is he's planting a seed here where if you're not kind of brainwashing the boomers by telling them who's a true conservative and who's not conservative, if you cut to the chase and say, we say Merry Christmas here, this is America, we're building walls to keep people out, and we're nationalist. And Trump, in particular, is always talking about the American story. Pioneers, the explorers, the settlers, the industrialists.
He's quoting Napoleon.
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Quoted Mussolini.
Yeah, oh, did you remember
that?
I missed that one, no.
He said in the campaign, he tweeted, better to live one day as a lion than 100 as a sheep. And some journalist said, do you really want to be associated with Mussolini? And he goes, I want to be associated with interesting quotes. So good.
Yeah.
But
where's that guy?
Right.
Right.
I miss him.
Yeah.
And, but what they feared, what Shapiro feared, is that he was a populist. Like he was really rallying the peasants in an anti-elite message, saying like the problem is the elites, the rich, the government. He was rallying the rubes around the flag and the cross, less so the cross, more so the flag, but there was still, it was implicit.
It was
sort
Christian
of
rhetoric, yeah.
Right. And, that's just like naturally anathema to someone like Shapiro. And by that, I mean, someone who is Jewish, pro-Israel, like he sees where that's going. So he was stridently never Trump. And I remember that when I was introduced to Shapiro, not directly, but this friend of mine texted Shapiro. I told the story on PBD. And she said, you got to take this guy under your wing. He's amazing. She goes, he's a little Trumpy, but you can show him what's right. What. And the implication is like, they knew that Trumpism was the problem. And that's why it was very important that they assimilated Trumpism into conservatism and that they neutralized anyone that Trump activated, that he awakened. Yeah. They wanted to suppress anything that looked like Buchanan, Sam Francis, Charles Lindbergh, the old America First Committee, the know-nothings. They wanted to suppress that great tradition, which has been alive in America for a long time.
It seems like, first wave Shapiro as a Buckley for you, and then later on Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
Did you guys ever, I imagine you didn't, but did you ever get to talk to each other directly?
No.
No? He just would never, just pretended that you didn't exist?
Yes.
Did he ever name you, though?
He did.
Okay.
Once.
Okay.
That was the only time he volunteered my name. Because other times he was asked about me,
right.
and he would deliberately avoid even saying my name. He would just say, like, that person, that guy is a troll. But one time during the Groyper War, at the end of it, it was the most brutal event. It was at Houston. And so he was outside at a small table, and he was literally just mobbed. Like there was a angry mob that surrounded the table of Groypers. And it was the most rowdy one because, at that time, he was doing all these events, and they were pretty tame.
Right.
And then the Q&A line would form, and like most of them would be Groypers. And they would respectfully wait their turn. They'd have their little question, their rosary, their MAGA hat, and they'd go up and respectfully ask the question. And Charlie would answer. He'd get jeered a little bit. But this one was like out of control because it was out in the open. He was at a small little table, and he was just surrounded by Groypers screaming, booing him, yelling at him. It was brutal. And at the end of it, he got a question about me to debate me. And this was like, I get secondhand embarrassment. He had next to him like something covered in like a sheet the entire time. He pulls off the sheet at the very end. It's a TV. And he pulls up a clip from my show from when I was in high school.
Wow.
When I said that I didn't like Trump in like 2015. And I was a senior in high school, and I said, Trump is not a serious candidate. He needs to let someone like Ted Cruz in or whatever. But he couldn't get the TV to work. So he pulls off the sheet like, oh, Nick Fuentes, about that. He takes the sheet off. He's going to play this clip. And like the audio's not working. The video's like a classic AV problem. And while he's trying to put this together, people see what's happening and they just start booing him viciously. Charlie Kirk says, Nick Fuentes is a Groyper grifter and I'm out of here. And he gets up to leave and the mob follows him. So he gets up and is walking through the campus getting followed by like 200 people chanting, America first, America first. It was brutal. And that was the only time he ever mentioned me. And I honestly, it makes me a little emotional. It's sort of tragic that I never got to talk to him.
Yeah.
There's like something deeply sad that our clash in many ways sort of defines like the Generation Z dialectic. And it's just a crossover that never happened, never will happen now.
Yeah.
And it's very sad to me.
Yeah, it is sad. Who do you think was worse, Shapiro or Kirk, towards you?
They were both pretty rough. I would say that Shapiro really pursued me with a vengeance, and all of his people did too. They were like flying monkeys. Cabot Phillips was a big one. I know I can't swear on your show, but he was a jerk, okay? His dad, Tim Phillips, ran Americans for Prosperity, which is like this cutout for like corporations to sell deregulation. And Cabot, so the guy's like royalty, because his dad runs this was a very powerful nonprofit. And he was at Campus Reform, and this guy was constantly attacking me on Twitter. Now he's at Daily Wire as like their editor-in-chief, I think. But it was him. It was Josh Hammer was with Daily Wire at the time. He was always on my case. Elliot Hamilton, Aaron Bandler, like they had a whole clique always going after me on Twitter. But Charlie was pretty brutal too, because they put together like a highlight reel of all the clips compiled by Media Matters on Twitter. Benny Johnson did, who worked at Turning Point, and said, here's Nick denying the Holocaust. Here's him saying he hates women. Here's him saying something racist about black people. And they were like inquisitors, looking for Groypers and Turning Point, firing them wherever they could find them, firing people for being in a photo with me.
Wow.
So they really blackballed me hard. They all did.
But did you have momentum at that point? Or they could just see the potential of what you would become?
In 2017, Shapiro went hard on me because they saw the potential. I had no momentum.
Right.
They just saw, it was sort of like Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
They kind of saw that I had a force ability, and they're like, this guy's going to be a Jedi, In 2019, it was more like Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I'm going to complete your training. Because in the Groyper War, I was surging. Huge live stream audience, huge organic following, doing events. And they really just tried to knock me out of orbit. And largely they succeeded with reputational damage, censorship. I was told that a Jewish fixer got me kicked off YouTube.
Really?
Shortly after that, because as retaliation for the Groyper War.
Wow.
Because the Groyper War was in December. That's when I got my first strike, December 19. And then February 2020 is when I got banned.
Wow.
So, so they, Daily Wire tried to throttle me in the crib. Turning Point really tried to destroy any momentum I had.
Big difference that I see between, Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro is two. One, and this is a big difference, Charlie was a Christian. Ben Shapiro, no.
Yeah.
And second, Charlie, I wasn't an avid listener, but I would tune in every now and then if something was going viral or see this or see that. And you see like some of the early days, and then even not that long ago, maybe 3 years, 3 years ago, 4 years maybe, where he's like raising his voice and stands up and starts shouting at someone who's saying, "What place do openly, aggressively homosexual people have as leaders in the conservative movement?" And Charlie's like defending the sodomites. Like his natural instinct is like, they're great.
Yeah.
Like, who are you to say that they can't be, a part of this and leading? And does God not love everyone? I mean, just like every cliche cringe you could possibly imagine. But even that, like, to be fair, he shifted.
Mm-hmm.
He really did. And so, like, when I think of Shapiro and I think of Charlie Kirk, and you know them both, or about them both much better than I do, but one's a Jew, right, and one's a Christian. That's a pretty big difference, But then beyond that, one seems to be just kind of static. Like, I don't feel like there is any evolution with Shapiro.
No.
Whereas Charlie, it's sad because it's a brother in Christ, heritage American, and I thought he had some good stuff. I thought he really did, and it's interesting to see what he would have become. Like, who knows where he would have landed. I think eventually you guys would have gotten that debate.
I think so.
I think you would have. Especially, and here's the thing, I don't think 10 years from now. I think that debate could have happened in 2026.
Yeah.
Like next year. It's kind of crazy to think. Any final words for this episode? America first, Christian nationalist. What do you think?
I think they're deeply connected, and I think you almost can't have one without the other.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
So I'm in favor of an alliance and a synthesis of the two.
I'm in. Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. What'd you guys think of this part one of Nick Fuentes being interviewed by this guy? Obviously, he said it multiple times. There's a 10-part series, so it's going to come out every Wednesday. So we'll definitely be reacting to the second part of this whenever it comes out. So yeah, I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you later.